Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen here with Amy Blackford, and those of you who are listening to the live stream will notice we don't have our intro music, but that's coming for next week. I'm in the middle of creating all these intros for everybody, but that's just something to look forward to, right, Amy? This is something that's going to come in the
Absolutely, new
future.
enhancements, and we're going to work with the glitches. It's all good things coming.
It's funny because listeners are getting used to the fact that I actually have videos for the other shows for like Thursday and
Right.
Friday and so forth. I just didn't get to the Monday show.
And that's okay.
But we're getting there. It's just because I have to make a different video every time. So
Right, and it's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress, exactly. So anyway, I wanted to start off today with an email that I received from a listener named John.
Okay.
In regard to, I created a little poem that I read on the show on Friday.
Beautiful.
I called it Ode to Letting Go of a Rock.
Okay.
And was sort of a tongue-in-cheek prose poem about all the different ways that people try to let go of things by little techniques and so forth, the different things that they do. And the whole point of the poem was to say, all you do is let go.
Yeah.
Don't do all that other stuff.
Right.
And so it was a bit of fun. And John wrote in to say he really liked the poem. He said it got him thinking and even solved something that had been plaguing him for some time.
Isn't that the best?
That is so cool.
That you were inspired to do that and it affected John.
Yeah, how about that?
Point.
So that's pretty good. That's really good. So thank you, John. Appreciate you sending in that email to let me know. That was really, really good. Also, people who are used to watching the show will notice I got a different background now. I've decided to go galactic.
I like it. Expanding.
We talk about the universe, right? Well, I don't really have a photo of the universe, but a galaxy that's close. Well,
I love it.
There are millions of galaxies. Maybe it's not all that close, but it's closer than just a shot of the Earth. Let's put it that way.
That's right.
Okay. So anyway, some changes happening around here. Louis can't join us today. He's really got a tough gig today. He's vacationing in Wales. I mean, that's really difficult.
I mean, that is a real issue. I'm so sorry for him.
He sent us some pictures. Gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous Welsh countryside. Oh, beautiful. Yeah. So he may not have internet, but boy, has he got fun. Really, that's what he's got.
Absolutely, and he's always here in spirit.
Absolutely, he is. But that doesn't stop us from having a topic today. We have a pretty good one. You came up with this topic, and I'm gonna let you not only introduce it, but I'm also going to let you talk about where it came from, generically speaking, because it's something that we all have thought about at one time or another. I think it's something that kind of comes toward the end of the list of things that we study when we're trying to figure out how to be a conscious creator. But it really needs to be higher on the list, doesn't it?
It's actually one of to me, the foundational pieces until you can kind of build on it.
Mm-hmm.
So the topic of today is forgiveness, and I think it's a greatly misunderstood word. And over the course of, I want to say, like the last 3 years of my life especially, there has been a reoccurring theme, and it's been around the topic of forgiveness and relationships and family dynamics and forgiving myself, all these different varying degrees of forgiveness. And I think this is such an important topic because it is so misunderstood that people resist it, and therefore they limit their ability to kind of lay the groundwork for the other layers of manifestation and this kind of clearing of these blockages.
Mm-hmm.
So I recently wrote a blog on my Word Warrior Press about forgiveness, and it was instigated by this kind of overarching theme that I have going on over this extended period of time. So whenever I see a repeating theme, it really, something will happen in my present moment that will all of a sudden make me realize, hey, this is the situations and the people are changing, but this is a reoccurring topic, and I need to take a closer look at it and come to terms with that.
Well, that's paying attention, isn't it?
Yes.
It's easy to not pay attention to what feedback we get from our environment, from our internals, from our other people that we deal with, because the feedback is always coming, but do we always pay attention? You paid attention. That's good.
Right. And many times, and one thing why I wanted to address this is it takes repeating the same theme, the same situation, but the components keep changing. That is when I always know there's some inner work that I need to do on the topic so that I can resolve this and come to terms with it. And so hopefully it won't have to keep repeating itself. So forgiveness, to begin, I think it's greatly misunderstood because many people think forgiveness means condoning the actions of others that have hurt us, meaning by saying I forgive you, it is saying that a boundary was crossed and that's okay. And therefore we will resist that, especially if we've been particularly hurt. We will resist forgiveness because we think that means we're surrendering and now just saying it's okay, do that again.
Yeah, right. Yeah, which it doesn't mean at all.
No. And so there's that. So the key here, and key number one, is learning to forgive ourselves. Because until we can learn how to forgive ourselves, we cannot. There's three keys, and they all interlink. But until you can learn to forgive yourself for any perceived mistakes, things that you did that you feel sorry for, we cannot change the past unless you've got a time machine.
Well,
as I know, that isn't created yet.
H.G. Wells may be tuning in. I can't say for sure that he's not,
As far as I know, the only time machine we have is in our mind. And so going over a past circumstance that we feel guilty for, that we feel any sort of negative emotion around, there's a sense of hopelessness because we cannot change it. And so then we create what I call suffering, because we are continuously reliving and activating the emotions as if it's happening in the present moment around this topic that we cannot change. And we keep ourselves locked in almost this like time loop of reliving it, having to go through the emotional reaction to it. And there's really no hope of breaking free of it, because
I think it's safe to say you're not the only one who calls it suffering. I think a lot of people call that suffering.
That is what suffering is. We can do things that we regret, but as long as we don't continuously bring it back up and recall it, that's what suffering is, because there is no forward motion from that. We can only learn from it and say, I did this thing, I forgive myself. So I would encourage everyone to make a list of things that you feel that you did wrong, that you wish you could change, and go over each one of those things and say, I forgive myself. And you'll know when you have actually forgiven yourself, you'll feel the release. And I don't encourage you to try to move on to that next thing until you feel it with that first thing. Also start with the easiest thing to forgive yourself for. It's like with manifestation. Don't try forgiving yourself for something that is really caused you a lot of suffering. And so you can kind of build up this practice.
Yeah, you're building a momentum, right? You don't want to start by trying to push the biggest boulder and get frustrated because it's not moving, right?
Right. Start with, and then you'll also learn what it feels like when you actually feel yourself getting into that space.
This is a good idea too, to do this for a number of reasons. The foremost reason that comes to my mind is that of all the people in our lives that we can be hard on, there is no one beside ourselves that we're hardest on. We are harder on ourselves than anyone else.
The only reason we judge others is because we are so harshly judging ourselves.
Oh, yeah. And we're good at it, by the way. It's nice to have a skill, don't you think? Yeah. I mean, it's just not necessarily the right application of a skill, but still, it's a skill.
Right. I call it we have the bully and the victim. And the bully is literally every teacher, parental, and these things are not done on purpose, but we take on from childhood certain perceptions of you get a reward if you behave a certain way,
Mhm.
and if you act a certain way, you get punished. And so we are kind of going through our lives learning to people please, and basically our actions are being judged, and so we will start changing our behavior. So even when those people are no longer even present, we take on those internal voices, and that's the bully. And when you become conscious of your thoughts, you will be almost horrified that you are literally your biggest bully.
Take out the word almost and you've got it. That was me.
Absolutely. And
it's terrifying. It's scary because you
It
realize
is.
just how many thoughts are going on. And like, how on earth am I going to marshal and corral all of those thoughts? That's the
Yes.
first fear, right?
The way that I've learned to subdue the bully is to always say to myself when I start having a really self-deprecating thought is this how I would speak to my child, my husband, my best friend, people that I love? And 100% of the time, the answer is no.
Yeah.
And so why am I speaking to myself this way? I want to be my own best champion.
Yes.
So this also helps because the bully activates the victim, the inner child, the one that is going to now agree with what the bully is saying and feel very bad about it. And it's a vicious cycle. And so until you learn to forgive yourself, this is a cycle that will kind of keep you locked in this never-ending loop of beating up on yourself, feeling really sorry for yourself about it, and there's really no hope of freeing yourself from it.
That's definitely a loop to get out of. There's no doubt about that. That's one.
That is the first key. The second key, from my perspective, is forgiving life circumstances, because we are born into a certain set of circumstances that we have no control over. And when we accept that, it becomes a lot easier to forgive ourselves, and it becomes a lot easier to, instead of looking at life as a punisher, as it is out against us, as it is a malevolent force, I have no control over these external circumstances, everything is random. We can start looking at life as a teacher and as a best friend. And so even when things are happening to us that are painful, hurtful, traumatizing, if we can understand that we live in a benevolent system that is, there's always at the end of whatever traumatizing experience, whatever hardship we're going through, there is a lesson in it that if we can see it and glean the nuggets that we're being given, always are for our benefit. This is a really hard one for people to comprehend because there seems to be so much injustice, and I'm not saying you're not going to be dealt injustice and hardship, and all of ours vary. The fact is if you can have this perspective that life is literally your teacher, it is doing it to get you to all of the dreams and desires that you wish. This allows us to release this feeling of we're being punished. We're being punished because of wrongdoings in the past that we cannot change. So it all links together.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Because you've gotten my thought process going by this up-close examination of the nature of how hard we are on ourselves, and we are really just amazingly hard on ourselves. And you were tying it in very effectively to past experiences, influences from the past, the earlier parts of our lives and so forth. One of the interesting ideas, and it's more than an idea, it's actually a practice that I've heard taught by a number of teachers. The first one that comes to my mind is Neville Goddard, but he's not the only one who ever taught this. He called it the pruning shears of revision, basically taking an old history, particularly something that you tend to replay over and over in your mind, and then changing the storyline.
Yes.
Turning it into some other storyline so that it doesn't have the same kind of sting, and actually it could actually feel good if you're successful at really
100%.
turning around how you feel about it.
Yes, absolutely.
So how does that tie into what you're talking about in terms of the forgiveness model?
Okay, so in terms of the forgiveness model, it ties into forgiving life. So in my circumstance, I came from this is a shared common experience. I had a life hardships and family challenges that in my teen years, I got into that anger place with it where I felt victimized. I felt I had been dealt an unfair deal.
Mm-hmm.
When I was comparing my life to the life of a lot of my other friends, and it increased that anger. As I started to spiritually develop, I realized I needed to start looking at not even creating a false narrative, but starting to reframe the perspectives that were making me bitter. Okay, and so that started the process. Then, as I started to even progress further, I did start visualizing and having these experiences in lucid dream experiences where I was experiencing alternate realities of these versions of if different choices had been made that I really actually had no control over. And that allowed me to really start having a different narrative. Now, this one is a struggle. I still struggle with it. And so it's a back and forth. But I can say that in the model of forgiveness, it definitely allows you to understand that, to me, time is not linear. And so in the present moment, if you make the choice to create a new narrative, you actually connect to a past parallel version that the narrative was different. And it becomes easier to assimilate that. So you will start having thoughts that align with it. You'll start having dreams that align with it. And I've had this experience. So it makes changing the narrative a bit easier.
Speaking from my own experience about what I've been able to prune and revise in the past, I find that the forgiveness step, if I use that as the first step, makes it easier to do the rest of the revision.
Right.
I mean, literally, I use the forgiveness as a way of it's kind of like if you have a jar that's too hard to open, right? And so you whack the jar on the side of the table to break the seal, to break the vacuum seal, so it makes it easier to open. Forgiveness does the same kind of thing. If I forgive myself, it's like I just broke that seal. So now I'm not dealing with this huge resistance factor. And now I can start thinking about and feeling about that new revised story that I'm going to start telling myself and training myself to believe.
Yes.
But until I do the forgiving, that first step of forgiveness makes it possible. Without that, I'm just trying to open a jar that's got a vacuum seal on it. I mean, it's just, it can be really tough.
Against yourself. I mean, going back to our reality, everything externally is literally a mirror to what is going on internally. And so it would be like standing in front of a mirror and you're looking at yourself in the mirror and you're trying to fix your hair or whatever, but you're trying to
I don't have that much hair to fix, but I'll take your point.
But you're trying to fix the mirror image, not the actual image. Reality is exactly designed the same way. So you cannot change anything externally until you change the perspective internally. It's impossible. And it can become very frustrating. So always the first step in changing anything in your external reality, you have to change the internal perspective and belief that you have. So this comes down to, I'm broke. I have a belief that I'm not going to be able to generate enough money. Until you change your feelings around prosperity, you will never see prosperity. And
isn't it an odd thing too that
yeah,
not only does the internal come first, but there's also a little piece of our brains that say, well, changing my mind internally isn't going to make any difference. It's like
right,
we've got this programming that says not
absolutely.
only is it not effective to go inside, it's a waste of time to go inside.
Right.
Which is not true, but nevertheless, that's what the old programming has taught us.
Absolutely. The
You know,
program, I mean, we are from babies
Mhm.
programmed to actually operate in the exact opposite way of what we're talking about. We
Go
are
figure.
basically born into an external environment, and life is just happening to us. We have
Hmm.
absolutely no control over it. So you'll even hear people say, well, that person got lucky or whatever, but it's never that that person actually created it through believing it, applying these things that we're speaking about.
You very
And
nicely
so,
summarized the first 50 years of my life. I just want to say thank you very much for
right,
that.
right. And actually, the older that you are, when you first start learning this, it takes longer and
Mm.
it's harder to unprogram. So,
Yeah. Well,
with 50,
there's a lot of tapes built up. I mean, it's not like in
right,
that 50 years the mind was
you got
blank.
to peel away a lot of layers. You have to have a
There
lot
are a lot of layers. Yeah.
and I always encourage people that are trying to learn this. It's not like you become an incredible artist overnight or
Mm,
any craft or skill. You've got to hone it and you've got to practice it,
that's right.
and you have to
Mhm.
be willing to. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to work every time. But instead of saying this doesn't work, it's that you are learning to master it.
No, well,
At
that's
a
it.
certain point, you're going to break on through to the
Mhm.
other side.
You do. You break through. The thing I found is you don't really break through in one great big, smash
No,
through the
no,
wall. It's
this is
like
in stages.
it's like little holes in the dike open up, right?
Right.
This hole gets a little bit bigger, and that hole gets a little bit bigger, and then over time you notice, oh, the water's flowing.
Yeah.
Okay. When did that happen? Who turned the
Right.
water on?
Right. Okay. So that leads us into key number 3, which is
Okay.
being able to forgive others.
Oh yeah.
This is one of the hardest, and I still struggle with it. Total transparency. I will get triggered immediately when I feel that someone has done something wrong to me. I feel
Mhm.
betrayed. I feel whatever, emotion that would make me feel that I needed to forgive someone. I will immediately go into defense mode. All of that stuff comes up. That is being human. And
Mhm.
basically, what I've learned and where people misunderstand forgiveness is in order to come to forgiveness for others does not mean I am condoning what they've done. I'm not saying that we will even have the same type of a relationship based on what's happened. That normally will be directly tied to how they handle the communication from there.
Mhm.
True forgiveness is an act of self-love. It
It
means
is.
you are not going to carry the burden
Right.
of what has transpired between you and another. Number one, it happened to teach you something.
Mhm.
So that's already, it's a gift. So you
Mhm.
can choose to look at it that way. And that will allow you to also have compassion for the person that you feel has wronged you or the life circumstance that has wronged you or whatever has happened. In order to achieve forgiveness, you first have to understand that person is dealing with their own level of challenges and life
Mhm.
experiences. And so don't take it personal. That's very hard to do.
Mhm.
It is very hard to do, no matter
Mhm.
how personal it feels. At the end of the day, that's your choice. You can agree they did this against me and it's all about me. But if we
Mhm.
go back to everything is coming from an internal place, you have to give other people that credit as well.
That's
And
true.
so forgiveness you can forgive and you can forgive and also mend. That is 100% dependent on the other person's willingness and you seeing that they get that they have their own work to do. And if the relationship is worth mending, you work together as a team and come to that understanding.
That's true.
However, there are people that are unwilling to face their own lack of forgiving themselves, life circumstances, and they aren't capable of meeting you in a space where you're going to be able to sync up. Then that becomes very toxic. And those are the relationships that I will forgive, but I also will not expose myself to someone who is going to repeat that pattern over and over and over again. We're just not in sync. And I'm not so attached to relationships that I'm willing to basically put myself through that.
I think the way I would express what you're describing is when we forgive somebody else, when we put ourselves through the space or into the space of forgiving somebody else, what we're really doing is letting ourselves off the hook.
Right.
Because and that's really what forgiveness is for. It isn't so much for the benefit of the person that you're forgiving. It's for your own benefit, so that you can be nicer to yourself and give yourself a little more benefit of the doubt.
Around that rock, that baggage of what happened that you had no control over. You can only learn what lesson was meant to come out of this for me, because I'm not a victim. I understand life is my friend, and everything that's happening to me is showing me it's an inner reflection of another refinement that I can make.
Well, it can be a lesson. It can also be just a recognition that life is actually pretty good.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't necessarily, I mean, there's often is a lesson attached, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't have to be that there's a lesson. It can simply be, the lesson is, I'm okay. That's the whole lesson. There's nothing else to learn there. It's just, oh yeah, I can relax. I don't have to get all upset about this.
Right.
It's all a choice. I make the choice at any given instant in time of what it is I'm going to respond to something. So
and learning how to control an emotional reaction around it. Yeah.
Let myself off the hook. Give myself cut myself some slack. They say cut me some slack. Cut myself some slack.
Always. And that doesn't mean that we should. There's such a beautiful balance between being very conscious and aware. I'm very aware of my weaknesses and my strengths. The difference is I no longer beat up on myself over my weaknesses.
Yeah.
I embrace them as part of who I am, and I actively work on boosting them and trying to resolve them. But I don't create this sense of I'm not good enough, or there's something wrong with me. And it's a great balance, because it keeps me aware of the things that I think and do that still create experiences that I'm not enjoying. So it gives me more control over my external reality and what I'm manifesting. And then my strengths, I amplify those. And so I'm finding, as I'm going along this path, the balance is becoming greater and greater. It's much easier for me now. When something happens and I feel bad about it, it's easy for me to shift, because I'm like, well, I forgive myself. It's okay.
Yeah. And when you're willing to forgive yourself that way, I think you mentioned how you are very aware of your strengths and your weaknesses. And I think that ultimately anybody who's going along this conscious creator path is learning that, particularly when they're trying to learn how to apply forgiveness and when to apply it. I think the other thing that happens, though, is the longer that you stay on the path, the longer you're continuing to, do the self-development and do the self-forgiving and all that.
Yes.
I think you get to the point where, you're aware that the weaknesses are there. You just don't really give them a whole lot of attention.
No, that inner voice might flare up for like 30 seconds and then it's gone.
Yeah, I may go into the shower and fire for 10 seconds and then I clean up. It's like, it's done, right?
It's when, I first started learning the law of attraction and into monitoring my thoughts based on my emotions. At first it was like, oh my goodness, this is it's like a runaway train. I couldn't even believe the amount of negative thoughts I was having in a day. And over the years, and it hasn't been a struggle, I don't have to deal with that level. It just keeps lessening as I'm going.
An interesting thing that I've discovered over time, that I've kind of experienced over time, is that the more that I give my attention to the stuff that feels good, and the more that I take my attention away from the stuff that doesn't feel good, and the more that I do like meditative type
Yes.
stuff. I mean, for me, it's mirror exercises, but it could be just straight meditation, or whatever it is that you do that helps clear the mind of all that stuff that you don't want. I find that even when I've gotten to the point, and I am pretty much at this point most of the time, even when I've gotten to the point where my mind is clear most of the day, I mean, it's blissfully silent most of the day, and I really, really like that.
Oh,
But
wow,
even
that's amazing.
it is a great place to be, let me tell you, and you can get there. It takes some doing, but you can get there. I thought for sure I wouldn't, and I got here. So even though I thought so, I still got here. But my point is, even when you're in that space, you still can find yourself having a tendency to deliberately go after a thought that you realize afterward was not what you really like.
I know.
In other words, just eliminating those tapes playing in the background
Right.
doesn't stop you from making those choices.
Right.
It makes it easier. Don't get me wrong. It makes it a whole lot easier to be selective about what it is you're going to focus your
you
attention on.
notice it more.
You notice it. You do. Yeah.
Immediately, when you're in tune with your emotion, when you go from feeling just, calm, everything's great, to suddenly what we would call a lower vibration emotion, it triggers like, what was I just thinking about? Why was I? Because they're sneaky. I mean,
They are.
some of them you would literally are not even aware of until the emotion is letting you know something, you're thinking about something that is not in your benefit.
So that's where I take it to the point of asking myself, not only did I go in a direction that I didn't really feel good about, but do I forgive myself for going in the direction that I didn't feel good about? And then what thought process or what path or what topic do I deliberately choose to go to next instead?
Right.
In other words, instead of turning it into another opportunity to beat myself up, I say, okay, I know where that one goes. My mind's been really quiet all this time. I just chose a thought that doesn't really suit me. Am I going to beat myself up? No, I don't have time for that. I forgive myself. Move on. Let's go for the nice thought.
Yeah.
Let's go for the one that actually feels good. And there are times, quite honestly, where I can't remember what the good ones are.
Yeah.
I just can't. I mean, they just don't come to my mind, and that's why I keep a list on my wall. If I'm having trouble getting, I've done the forgiveness piece, I've done the quieting the mind piece, but I still have that tendency to go find another thought that I don't really like so much. That's where I use the list. The list helps me reorient my attention so that,
right.
For one thing, I'm not having to forgive myself as often, which is a nice thing.
It is.
It's a way of saying, okay, I've actually given myself, I've cut myself some of that slack I was talking about. But even more than that, when I am shifting my attention deliberately through my list to stuff that feels good, I find that, well, first of all, it's a vibrator. No, that's kind of like a given, right? But the other piece is that it's also a way of it's forgiving without having to forgive. I guess is the best way I can say it.
Yeah.
Because right. I'm in a better feeling place. So
there's nothing to forgive.
There's nothing left to forgive. Exactly. Right. It's like that was at a time something that needed forgiving. It doesn't need it anymore.
Yes.
It's gone. And now I can celebrate. Hey, I'm feeling good now.
I want to also add to that to expect. So there is a topic called spiritual bypassing, and it's a big one. Where I believe this really kind of keeps a lot of people that would like to learn more about this at bay, because there is a misconception around the law of attraction and what people coin the new age terminology, where basically this idea of being a manifester of your reality and owning your own thoughts and all of this is some form of escapism, that you're just not tapped into reality and you don't care. So I really want to address this here, because there is some material out there, and I've seen lots of it, and I understand why some people perceive it that way. So there is grounded in reality, which is experiencing all of the spectrum of human emotion. To ever expect that you are only going to feel positive and happy all the time is, to me, it's a misconception, and it is not something to strive for, because we need contrast in order to continue to expand. It's just part of how this works, and it's part of the reality here. And so we can learn to shift quicker, like have the contrast, and then very quickly shift so that we get the benefit of both.
You use the term spiritual bypassing. Let's define that term more specifically. What do you mean when you use that term?
Spiritual bypassing it is basically an ostrich with its head in the sand. It's all good. We're all going to we're going to ascend to a different dimension, and anybody who is suffering just doesn't belong there. And it's actually quite a cold, uncompassionate view of life. And I've seen it a lot, and it is, so I want to be very clear that that does exist. And so it can, in my mind, and I've seen it a lot, where people can misunderstand. I feel like what we're talking about here is very grounded in reality. It's about being present here in the reality that we're in. It's not a form of escapism. It's about mastering the reality that we're in and being able to communicate better with ourselves, other humans, and having that compassion first and foremost for ourselves and each other. So there's a difference between that and this kind of, it's almost like a fantasy world. It's a construct that leads to, it isn't relatable. It isn't something that people can apply here. And so I feel like it can actually be quite damaging to people that are trying to open up to these new ideas, and then they come across material like this. And
let's see if we can define it a little bit more clearly than that. Because to be honest, right now it seems a little bit vague to me.
Okay.
Because I mean, if I were to take what you just defined it as, I would say, well, in many ways, what you're describing is conscious creation. Conscious creation is inventing a reality and making that your reality, and that's in a sense what you're complaining about. So I have to go back and ask again, what exactly is the spiritual bypass business?
To me, it's basically giving information to others that is not helping them in this grounded reality that we have here, in this dimension. It's basically a lack of compassion. It's a lack of a genuine connection. Like what we're doing here on the show is trying to take these concepts and apply them in real time to use as tools. Where for me, spiritual bypassing is using theoretical concepts that are not helpful in doing that. That's the best way I can describe it.
Because I'll tell you honestly, I've never really been for or against or even interested in the whole concept of spiritual bypassing. And partly that's because anytime I've ever seen it used as a term, it always seems to be used by somebody who is basically trying to blame somebody else for something. And so I lose interest in it really, really quickly because of that.
No, I get what you're saying, but I myself have seen it and experienced it. So I'm coming from a perspective of there is a difference between learning how to master this reality from a spiritual perspective and this form of storytelling and fantasy that can actually be, to me, very misleading. And it doesn't provide information that is helpful to the human experience here in mastering these spiritual components that we possess. So that's what I mean when I use that term.
I think for myself, I don't think about it one way or the other. I don't think about the term at all. But when I'm thinking about other people and thinking about people who are looking for help, and to me, that is a key component that they're asking for it.
Right.
I don't interfere whenever I see somebody helping somebody else who hasn't actually asked for help.
Right.
But I kind of step back and say, well, best of luck to you on that one. And the reason I say that is there are a lot of people who will, if they're experiencing some form of polarity, some sort of negative contrast that they don't like, they'll just vent it. They aren't necessarily interested in changing anything about it. They aren't really asking for help about it. They just want to vent it out there. And then somebody else comes along and says, well, all you have to do is this, this, and this. And they didn't really listen to the fact that they were looking for help.
You're right. They will use that term.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
So that term, that is not what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So to me, I don't even worry about a term. I just ask myself, did the person ask me for help? And if the person did ask me for help, then the second question becomes, what's actually going to help that person? Right. Am I going to just pull an answer off of the spiritualist shelf? Or am I going to find out what that person actually needs and then give them the information the way that they need to know it?
Right.
That to me is the much more productive way of doing something when it comes to helping somebody else. So, I mean, we're dealing with a whole range of individuals trying in all their various ways to be helpful to others or to be helpful to themselves. In some cases, it's just, it's going to be self-serving, which I kind of gather is where the spiritual bypass concept comes in, like self-serving rather than serving somebody else. And you know what? That's going to happen. It's going to be part of the human experience.
Absolutely.
I just don't give it a lot of attention, to be honest. I just like, okay, well, have fun, Not really my cup of soup, but if you want to drink that, fine. Just watch out for the hemlock. That's all. I just wouldn't pick that particular flavor. It's just not my flavor.
No. And there is also, as part of that, I would call it a spiritual elitist, where, and I see this a lot as well, where people that feel more highly evolved call others sheeple and
well, that's been going on for a long time,
right? And so this is kind of in the same category where there's a lack of a compassion, and it's almost like, okay, for me, spirituality means wanting to connect and work together, as humans, to help raise our consciousness.
I just think of somebody like that as somebody who is just, they themselves are hurting. And so they're basically projecting is what they're doing. They're projecting their hurt on somebody else and saying, well, you're the one with the problem and I've got the solution for you, even though I'm the one who's actually doing the hurting here. But we're not going to talk about the fact that I'm hurting. We're going to talk about the fact that you're hurting, and I'm going to fix that.
It's another huge form of polarity.
It really, and projecting is really the big part about it.
It's really my greatest hope, and especially in the times that we're in right now, that there's so many people that are really engaged with this material. I mean, every day in every way. And it really gives me a lot of hope that we are headed towards a time where more and more humans want to work together. And there's not all this labeling and separation and discord with each other.
I think we're already there. I think it's happening. I mean, the result may not be at the end of that journey yet, but the point isn't to be at the end of it. The point is to be in the journey. The point is to be part of it, and it's happening. It's kind of fun to watch.
We are. I mean, it's evidence of it.
Yeah. I'll tell you honestly, the part that excites me the most is when I see it in myself.
Yes.
When I feel my own, and when I see my own progress. Like if I compare myself to where I was even 10 years ago, let alone 20 years ago, and just, compare what I've learned in that time period and how I've evolved and how I've basically learned to forgive myself, to follow your theme and to let go of things and to, let go of that rock that I made a note to on Friday, I mean, it is an amazing transition to have gone through it. It's subtle. I mean, somebody who looks at me from the outside, who has not been following what I've been doing for the last 10 years, saw me 10 years ago, sees me now, they'll see a difference.
Yes.
They won't necessarily appreciate all of the aspects of that difference, but they'll see a difference.
Yes.
But they won't totally grasp how big of a difference it is to me.
Right.
That's the differentiator as far as I'm concerned. The fact is that
100%.
that I've
Because
experienced it in a way they don't.
You live it every
I
day.
lived it, yeah,
Yeah.
and I continue to live it, right. So that's where the biggest change happens, and that's the change I get most excited about. And then
Me
when I
too.
see, like here on the show, we get all these listeners who are listening in. We get hundreds of people listening in to the podcast, and then we get these emails, from people saying, "Well, you made this huge change in my life," and
It's the best feeling.
it's a great feeling. I mean, first of all, I tell them I didn't make the change you did. Congratulations.
Absolutely.
But I'm glad I was a part of it. That was fun. That's where it gets exciting. Yeah.
But they did the work and
absolutely.
made that connection, and that's what
Yeah.
it's all about.
Yeah, I'm not going to take credit for their stuff, but I'm going to take credit for being along for the ride.
Yeah.
That was good.
I mean, that's why you are so jazzed and putting your heart and soul into this podcast.
Oh, it's so much fun.
It is so much fun. I love it.
The other thing that I never really thought about it this way. Well, I can't say that. I did a little bit think about it this way early on when I was, first of all, making the decision to do a podcast. And then later on, as I was doing it over the years, I was hoping along the way that I would end up with a lot more like-minded things. That's one of the lot like-minded things, like-minded people in my life.
Right.
I think it's one of the things many of us ask for. We want to have more like-minded people. What came along surpassed my expectations.
Yeah.
It's fabulous. I mean, I'm here on the show. Well, first of all, look at all the co-hosts I have, including yourself, who are just, very like-minded and very positive and happy people. But also the listeners, and then hearing the stories of how the ripple effects from the listeners went to their family members or their friends. I mean, it's like this ever-growing rippling pond is what it feels like this infinite pond. I guess that's the best way to describe it. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I didn't really expect that part. That's been a joy, an unexpected, surprising joy to come along the way. So
those are the best because you didn't have expectations. You came from a place of joy.
Yeah.
And following that intuitive pull, and out of it, you're continuing to watch it expand. And the more joy you're getting out of it, the more it's going to expand. So there's always something to look forward to because it's just going to keep growing.
But I keep seeing it in the people.
Joy.
The people is what I'm saying. I'm seeing the people that are coming around me, so to speak.
Yes.
That's exciting. That's how I know to refer to what you were talking about earlier about the change that's happening globally.
Oh, yeah.
That's how I see the change happening because I just see all these people coming into my life in a big way who are into their change mode. They're into their high vibe, and it just keeps getting a bigger and bigger and bigger circle. That's exciting.
It is. I mean, again, that is the entire reason I even, contacted you to co-host.
Mm-hmm.
Is I had just that day had a conversation with someone about the current state of our world and how things were going. And I just really felt, I know that externally this is looking quite scary. It's looking a certain way, but I'm seeing and experiencing that this is part of actually a positive sign that we are headed into this new and expansive time. It's already happening.
Do you find like I do?
I turned the podcast on and you said it. And I was like, that's it. I really need to meet Walt and get on.
Do you find like I do though, that what you just described, that how did you say it? You had a particular phrase that you used. I'm trying to think how you just very nicely summarized in one sentence that transitional thinking that goes on. How did you say that? I can't remember what you said.
Transitional thinking, the shift in perspective.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was. Well, I was trying to latch into it because the way you said it, I had something that came with it that I thought would be perfect, and I can't draw it up, so I'll have to just do it inversely and away from the main point because I can't remember how I was going to say it. Put it this way: the fact that you came into the picture,
yes,
and that you shared your story, and you told your story, and you continue to tell your story, and you shared your insights, and you shared your feelings, and you shared your learnings, I guess perhaps is a good way to say it, is, to me, that's what life really is.
It is.
To me, that's where the the living happens. Maybe that's where I was trying to get to. It's where the
Beautiful.
living happens.
Yes.
Living happens in this stuff that we're
Yes.
dealing with right now.
Yes.
And the joy that's in there is just remarkable. It's certainly not something I expected. It's certainly not something that I thought was going to come along. I thought this was going to be something where I'd be, clawing my way tooth and nail every step of the way. But to find that, well, it fits the Abraham message. To find that when you start reversing the momentum and you keep the new momentum going, that it gets easier and easier until all of a sudden these different experiences that are very much in alignment with what you're talking about come to you. That's what happens. That's what has been happening. It's fun. It's exciting.
It's so much fun.
It is.
And it just continues to delight me, such as the new car that I just got.
Yeah, you shared that on social media. That was beautiful.
I just gotten a car 3 years ago, and through it had some body damage to it done living in that apartment complex, complex that my apartment I told you caught on fire, and I knew to move out 30 days before. Basically, I started a week ago. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, I thought, I need to trade this car in. And I had not had any thought of doing this.
Where did that come from?
Where did that come from? And I mentioned it to my husband, and he was like, yes, I've been thinking the same thing.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, after what happened with the apartment, and I could feel this feeling that something was mechanically going to go wrong. I can't put a finger on it.
Yeah.
The thought came out of nowhere, which I always trust, because that is definitely my higher self talking to me, my intuitive guidance.
And over time, we kind of notice it well enough that, I recognize the pull of that. There's a pull there that's very strong.
I got that I needed to leave that apartment.
Yeah.
And so the next day went on CarMax. I found the car in 5 minutes. I reserved it. We went. It was the exact car that I wanted.
Nice.
It was the perfect price. And we went in to the dealership. While we were in the dealership, the salesman, we ended up connecting with him on these topics that we're talking about right now, our life experiences. We were there for like 6 hours, and it was the most delightful experience, not just because I was getting the car, but it was the person that was facilitating it.
Yeah, sure.
And the perfect thing is that they gave me such a wonderful trade-in value. My car payment didn't change by a penny. It's
nice.
So yeah, it feels really good because I feel comfortable and like I made a really good decision. And so it's one of those things, the more in tune I'm becoming with trust, when you get that thought, trust it. Don't question it. And when you do, things just really fall into place very quickly.
It takes a while too to get used to that trust.
It does.
I mean,
I always questioned my thoughts before.
Well, I still do.
Yeah, I do too.
I mean, perfectly honest, I still do. But what I have learned over time is that there are certain impulses that come along that just feel different.
Yes.
It's hard to describe what's different about them. But there is a difference. There's like this little tug that says, no, this is one you pay attention to.
Yeah. It's so strong and it felt so clear. And it came out of nowhere, meaning this was not something
they always do.
Worrying about, thinking about, and it was just a download that I got, and I listened to that.
Which was very confusing to me early on because, like you say, it's very clear. But then again, there was all the stuff early on that I would be misleading myself on that also seemed very clear. How could that be? It took a while. You have to kind of become attuned to your own thing, your own connection internally, and recognize which is the real stuff and which is the stuff you just made up.
Yes, it's what intuitive thought is coming from what I call the higher self, the true mind, the cosmic intelligence that's all of us are tapped into, or the physical mind, which has paranoid, the virus, and that it's differentiating. There's a very different, distinct feeling.
And it's confusing because they both seem
God.
they both seem to be in the same place, right?
Yeah.
It's like here's the misleading thought, here's the higher self thought. They seem like they're in the same place. They appear the same way. They look the same. They smell the same. They taste the same. Everything's the same. So how do you tell them apart? What I finally learned is the difference is the one that's from the higher self feels better.
Yes, thank you. Perfect.
That's it. That's the whole thing.
It is so clear. You do not question it, and it feels good.
It does. It feels really, really good. In fact, it doesn't feel just like a little bit better.
Right.
Because those can also, you can get those. Those can be a little bit misleading. You're in a really bad place and something feels a little bit better. You say, oh, that must be the great answer. Well, not really. That's still a out of alignment
really
answer.
Feels exciting.
It feels like, oh, yeah. Oh, wow. Give me more of that one. That one feels good.
Yes.
That's the way it feels. Yeah. That's how you know you're on the right track. And that's where the forgiveness, getting back to the original topic, that's where the forgiveness really is intended to get us, right?
Yes.
Because when we're forgiving ourselves, when we're forgiving others, when we're forgiving the process, I don't remember what there was a third step. I don't remember what your third item.
The third one is forgiving others.
Forgiving others. What was the second one?
The second one is forgiving life.
Forgiving life. That's what it was. Yes. Yeah. So whether it's forgiving yourself, forgiving others, or forgiving life, any of those, they're all basically designed to do one thing, to get it to the point where you can feel that true message that's coming through.
Absolutely.
That's the whole point.
It clears all of that static out.
Oh boy, good word to describe it to is static, because that's exactly what it is. It's not just the static of radio out of signal. It's also the static of it's that kind of static too. It's both kinds of static.
Absolutely.
Oh, it's funny. That's really good. Well, thank you for sharing the this came from a post that you wrote. Isn't that what it was?
I have a blog. It's called Word Warrior Press. I'll actually put it in the comment section of the live video.
Good.
And people can go through and check those out. We may use those as topics in other ones. Mm-hmm. I started my warrior rules a long time ago on Facebook when I would have an insight. And when I say warrior, I mean spiritual warrior, meaning this is a deep insight that I've had. And I've actually even thought of at some point having a book with illustrations that go with it. But I really wanted to start a blog, and I give a challenge at the end for bloggers, readers to apply this insight in a way that they can, use it and apply it in their own lives. This was my newest one based on recent events, and honestly, the accumulation of the last 3 years of this theme continuously coming up.
Very good. Okay. Yeah. Well, good stuff. I want to make sure that I let people know, first of all, David Strickel, the Stream of David, is coming us to visit us tomorrow. So if you want to, first of all, if you're a live streamer and you want to ask a question, join us in the live stream, ask your question, and we will include it in the conversation. If you're if you're just a podcast listener and you want to send a question, then hey, we're glad to include your question too. So send an email or use the LOA Today app to send your question in that way, and we'll be more than happy to bring it up with the stream. Talking to the stream is like talking to Abraham. It's like being in the hot seat and talking to Abraham, and it's a wonderful experience. So even though we can't put all of our listeners in the hot seat at the same time, we can at least use the questions, which is more than you get with Abraham. Abraham, you get just the person who's in the hot seat, right?
100%.
Yeah. So this is like Abraham better.
So basically, now our listeners can go to the LOA Today page,
to the app,
Facebook page,
or the page,
just under the video, because you pre-put those up now.
Yep.
The reminder. Yep. Put a Q question and put your question in.
Yeah.
And then they're already queued up. So when it comes on, you can ask those questions and they can get answers.
And on the Wednesday show, we're also going to be following up on the experiment that we started last week. We started doing LOA experiments where people are encouraged to actually try to manifest things, kind of as a team, so to speak. So we're all doing these manifestations together. So you want to be a part of that as well. So I guess it's just another reason to keep listening and also keep paying attention to the LOA Today app and using that to send in your questions and comments, because we want you to be part of the conversation.
100%.
But Amy, this has been great. Thank you very much for doing this. I mean, we kind of missed Louis today, but it'll be good to have him back
Always,
next week.
but he'll be back, and it'll be
back.
wonderful.
It will be, and we'll have another topic for you. You have one challenge. Your challenge is to come up with something equally good.
Okay, I'm going to be referencing my blog again.
There we go. Okay,
I got lots of good stuff.
Good thing. I like that. So thank you very much. Thank you especially to the live streamers who are jumping in and sharing your comments. And thank you particularly to all of our podcast listeners, without whom we would not have a podcast. We'll see you all next time.
John was the original. We got a question in the beginning.
Oh, we got the question from John. That's right. Yeah.
Thank you, John.
We appreciate that from John too. So thank you very much. Anyway, we will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
That was awesome.